My name is Antionio. Here's my Twitter handle. And I've been working with Rails for around 6 years now. Maybe a little more if we count some freelancing work I've done before actually starting working full time with Rails. And maybe that's why people keep telling jokes about my gray hair or something like that. And well, during these years, I've participated in several different projects, a lot of different projects, and with a lot of different contexts, right? From small projects to big ones, from small teams to big ones. And I've seen a lot of different code throughout these years working on Rails. And I've seen a lot of complex code in all of these projects. Most of them have different and more complexity than others, but I have seen a lot of different types of complexity. The guys yesterday on the first talk, they showed a method of around 90 lines of code, I guess. And we have seen controllers with more than 1,000 lines of code. So it's really complex and hard to work with. And I've seen a lot of duplicated code too in these projects. Does anyone know any piece of code in the application you are working on that you know are duplicated, but you are like a little bit afraid of dealing with because you are like afraid of breaking? Do you have this type of duplicated in your application? Anyone? Okay. Yeah. Well, most of us have this problem in our application. Right? It's common. And what makes me really sad is when I see this type of duplication. When I see Rails features implemented in application code. Does anyone know has anyone ever seen some feature in your application that could be replaced with a Rails feature, an existing Rails feature? Anyone? Okay, a few hands. All right. Yeah, so this is the type of duplication that really makes me sad because we already have a lot of features in Rails that are there to be used freely by us, and we keep trying to implement these features in our own applications, right? And we see that all the time, right? Everywhere. It's like that people. We see it all the time. So, and the problem is that we get used to it after some time. So we see the code there, it's duplication, maybe there is some Rails feature that was like released in a new version, but I don't want to touch that code. We get used to it as the time passes. And that's a big problem. As the time passes, besides getting used to the code, we get afraid to deal with that duplication. And so let's see if today we can improve the situation a little bit with some Rails features that I'm going to show you, right? And hopefully these features will help you refactor existing code in our application, or maybe it will improve your developer life a little bit from now on. I work at Plataformatec. This is the company right now. Maybe one or two guys are new or have leave, but we are around 30 people now. And we are a Brazilian consultancy, web development consultancy, based in São Paulo, Brazil, main focus on Ruby and Rails. And well, since we were talking about Brazil, I had to add this out. Yeah, there is no World Cup there. I'm kidding. We are eager to have the World Cup in Brazil this year. Is anyone here going to the World Cup? Okay, sure, your hands. Cool. You're gonna have a great time there. Okay, Plataformatec loves open source. We try to do a lot of open source during Plataformatec life. And we may have noticed by Simple Form open source projects like Devise, right? Does anyone use Devise here? Cool, awesome. So Devise, I have something new to tell you. Devise was released around 5 years ago in a conference like that. We were releasing Devise to the world in a lightning talk back in Brazil in 2009. And so it's almost 5 years of Devise around. We also have Simple Form. Does anyone use Simple Form? Great. And we also have Elixir. It's a language that we are working on. Has anyone tried Elixir? Okay, put your hands. Okay, everyone else that didn't, raise your hand. You should definitely give it a try. Okay, I'm part of the RailsConf team, together with these other two guys, Jose and Rafael. Rafael is here with me. And in Plataformatec, we use pull requests a lot. And a lot of code review. We do that all the time. Okay? Yeah. And what is nice about that is that we don't only do that in our own projects, the projects we are working on. We do that in cross projects, across different projects. So I am usually reviewing code from other projects I'm not currently working on. Whenever I have time to do it, right? And that's really nice because we are always learning new things in the process. We are like 30 people developing software, and a lot of people know different things, right? We don't know the same things. So we are always learning from each other. And when we do things like cross projects, we learn even more. So we have examples like that, where we write a new feature or refactor something, and someone goes there, maybe from our own project or maybe from another project, and just tell us, hey, I learned something new in this pull request. Or like this, right? It's very common to see such comments, like even trolling us when we are writing some code, which is fun. And well, there are also some discussion on why we use one method over another, right? So we try to explain and discuss in our pull requests why we use A or B solution. And besides that, we also give hints when we should do blog posts and when we should do talks about something interesting that we learn in our pull request. And this was actually the one that made me start wondering why I should do this talk. After that look at this approval, you should do that. So here I am. We're going to talk about Rails 16 features. We'll see some really nice examples of these features, and some of these features are not very well used by many people, or maybe they are not very well documented in Rails, and this is something that we can improve in Rails, right? So we'll talk about the record, ActiveModel, Antionio, action view, action controller, and some other bonus stuff that I have for you later. So let's start with active record. Spoiler alert, I'm going to show a lot of code here. Okay, we're going to start with migrations, right? In some projects, I've seen people having to change the null flag from some attribute. In this example, I'm changing the name attribute of the authors table to be not null, right? And the problem with using change column is that we need to tell which is the type of the column we are changing here, because we could use change column to change the type of the column to something else instead of string it to be like text, for example. But in this case, I just want to change a null flag, so I could use change column null. It's a little helper that Rails has that allows you to just change that flag without actually saying which is the type of the column you are changing. Right. And one last side effect of that is that we can use the change method of the migrations to actually make it reversible. So you can run up and down, and the change is going to invert the false and true boolean. So you can use that. It makes your migration shorter and better. Right. We also have a way to change the column default value. It's also common to see change column and default values being used at the end as a hash. We also have this change column default helper, which allows us to do that. Right? It's more intentional revealing. And well, this one doesn't work with the reversible logic. We have to write it up and down because there is no way to know which was the previous default as the new, but we can use it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about conditions. In this example, we have an author model that has many articles, right? And articles can be in some status. They can be draft, they can be published. And here I want to grab which are the authors that have draft articles. So I'm doing joins on articles association and adding a condition on top of it where article's status is draft, right? And that works just fine. It's going to generate a circle like that. Just fine. Okay. What's the problem with that? The problem is that author knows too much about the draft condition. What is a draft condition for an article? And how can you factor that a little bit? We can use the relation merge method. So you can merge a condition, a scope, a relation from another model, for example, like I'm doing here. So instead of saying article's status draft, I'm just saying merge the conditions from the article draft scope. So it's going to grab the conditions from there and we have removed the duplication. The logic where what means a draft article is now in the article model, not anymore in the authors. So you don't have this duplication, right? Whenever you change your draft condition to be something else, you don't need to change here anymore. Okay, the SQL is the same. It's going to be the same output, so it's going to just work. One thing that some people I've seen some projects is people using this group counting. So you can group, you can group for any column using active record, and it's going to generate a SQL query like that, and it's going to return for you how many, for example, draft records I have and how many published records I have in this example. What is nice about the group counting is that you can add more columns to that. And it's going to group by the 2, 3, or more columns if you want to. So you can use that to grab information from your database more easily, right? Great. This was the lookup disapproval example. So if you need to grab some record from your database based on some condition, like where title go or none here, you can either grab it or raise an active record not found error, right? So raise has this little action called first exclamation mark, where it's going to raise the active record not found error for you. And the same happens for last, right? The only minor catch there is here is that it's only going to raise the error. There is no contextual message for that. So if you want a contextual message, you either need to raise your count error or we can send it, this is an improving Rails, right? This is something that we can do there. Okay, so Rails 4 introduces this new where .not method. When we need to negate a condition, right? I want to know all articles that are not draft, which can be like published, reviewed, or whatever status I have. I need to write that little piece of SQL, right? Status is not equal and the draft status. And it's going to generate a SQL query like that. But I can use where.not. And it's going to generate a better query because it's going to use automatically the table name in there. And it's more intentional revealing, so you should be using that. Right? Now I want to talk to you about some eager loading strategies. You know that Active Record has this include helper where you can use to avoid n+1 queries, right? And in this case, it's going to load. It's going to do a SQL query for finding all the articles and another one to load the authors, right, in a separate query. But if you add a condition like a where condition or an order condition that requires something from authors, Rails is going to be smart enough to join these two into one SQL query and to load it for you and avoid the n+1 problem, right? Because it's in the author's name. The point I want to go here is that we can tell Rails which strategy we want to use. So, for example, we can use eager load instead of includes if we want to force Rails to do one single query instead of two. Right? So here I'm not using the author's name anymore. I am just joining to the authors and doing one single query. So I'm telling Rails that I don't want two queries, I want only one. But I can use preload, which will force Rails to use two separate queries, which in this case is the same as includes. But the nice thing about preload is that I can use preload and also order by the author's name. So I'm doing a join to load all the articles, but I'm not loading the authors together with that in the same SQL query. I'm forcing Rails to do the other query to load the articles. So I can choose which is better depending on my situation, depending on the performance I'm looking at and what I'm going to do, right? So knowing the difference between eager load and preload, and maybe telling Rails what's better, what you should do is better for your performance-wise, your application, right? Okay, so ordering records. When we order records, like here we have the recent scope for the ActiveModel, we need to write down a little piece of SQL, like create that task or any order condition, right? So Rails also introduced this hash type of order, so you can use order task or order create that task in a hash-like format, and it's gonna create the order condition for you. It's very common when we need to grab some values from the database. Like here, I need to know what are the author names that I have in my database, right? Or what are the article tags that I have in my database. So we do an output map and grab all the names from the authors, right? That works, it's just fine. But we can do better. We can go ahead and just select the name, because it's just in the name in this case. So the query is just going to be select author's name, rather than all attributes, right? And that's basically the same as the plug method that Rails introduced. So you can grab a list of values from your database. But people have only used that more for grabbing only one attribute, and Plug allows you to do more than one attribute at the same time. So you can grab a list of more attributes from your database, rather than have to match them and create an array manually, right? Which is cool. Another thing that is really nice with Plug is that you can combine that with a distinct clause, so it's gonna query distinct values for you. Right? Well, this trick maybe most people have already used it, the two-parameter method, where you can combine like an ID, in this case the article title, to build nicely URLs, right? So when you call like article path and passing an article, it's going to be /article / some nice pretty URL like that, right? But RailsConf introduced this new class method for you. So you can call these two parameters and passing which is the attribute you want to use for that. And it's going to build that pretty URLs for you. The only catch with that is, if you see the previous one and this new one, there is a minor difference in the output there. Because this new one, it automatically truncates the value in 20 sharp, the title in this example, because it wants short URLs, right? Which is good, right? Rather than having maybe this big URL, having a short one is better. Cool. Well, this is very common for code to see in views, right? We usually need to test if something exists, and then to render a collection or something, or render a message, and otherwise we render a not found message or something. Really common code. But there is a catch here. The difference between using exists or present. When you use exists, it's going to do a query every time to select if there is at least one record in the database for that association or that relation, right? So if you do like this example and call exists, and then render the collection, it's going to do an each in this collection. So it's going to be like this, two queries. One to know if there is one record in the database at least, and another one to iterate over the records and render them. However, if you use present is going to load the association for you in one query, all the records, right? And then when you iterate over them, it's not going to do another query because the records are already loaded, so you are avoiding one extra query to see if there is any record in the database. And any, as in the title there, any works the same way as access. So if you call either access or any, you are doing another extra query that might not be necessary. So if you need the records, make sure you use present, right? And the last one I want to talk to you about in active record area is benchmark. So let's say we have an expensive operation like this one that sleeps for 2 seconds. Very expensive, right? And you want to benchmark that. So we could like use the Ruby benchmark library, or we could do our own homemade benchmark, like grab the start and end times and calculate the difference to know how much it's taking. And it's going to tell you like 2 seconds or something, right? But Active Record has already this benchmark method where you can pass in a description for that, and then you can call your own operations inside the block. So it's gonna log for you in the Rails logger this operation, so you can have like every request that you use this method is gonna be logged in your output there, and you can later on filter and see how long it's taking and maybe add some metrics on top of it. So you can change your method just to add the benchmark call there, like we did here. It's a class method, so I could use like article.benchmark too. And you have your benchmark code in timestamp in your logs, right? Cool. So let's have a little break now. Yesterday, someone tweeted to me about this one to put a slide for Rails summer of code, and well, I'll get it for him, right? So why not? So here it is. You should definitely check it out. And I will get my free code. Okay? Yeah. I will definitely think on something later. And that's it. Right. Cool. So let's talk a little bit now about ActiveModel and ActiveModel. So the guys yesterday talked about ActiveModel model, and I want to explain a little bit more about it today. So I have some code like this in applications where people want to, let's say, create a contact form, simple example. And for them to validate stuff, they need to like do manual validations like that. Is name present? Is email present? Is message present? Whatever is present here in my attributes, and then deliver the email, for example. So they need to set all the attributes. They could create an initialize method and receive a hash, but in this example, this code they didn't. Set all the attributes and then call deliver only. Well, it works, it's fine, right? But you can't use this class with Rails helpers. Like you can't use it form for, you can't use it render, because it's not prepared to communicate with these helpers, right? And for you to do that, you have to write a class kind of like this, a little bit bigger than the first one, right? You have to put some ActiveModel modules there for you to be able to validate, for you to be able to communicate with form for as it expects. You would have to have a persistent method there. That's the API that's required for you to communicate with action back, right? So you have to know and write all this. But Rails 4 introduced an ActiveModel model. So you can just include that particular module into your class, and it's going to be ready to use with Rails helpers, form for, render, whatever other helper that works with an active record object is going to work with this class too. And you can refactor your code to use the validations that are built in ActiveModel model, included in ActiveModel model. So you can just call valid and use the validate's name, email, message there. Right? Well, you can initialize, call deliver, and you'll be happy to work, you have errors and all the normal stuff, right? Let's talk a little bit about Action Mailer. So this is a newly generated, just Rails generate mailer notifier with a new article method, and you get something like this. And what people do when they need to change the subject, like to use internationalization or something like that, just throw that comment away and add a subject call with an I18 call in there, which works. You just add that to your locale file, and it's going to work, right? What some people are not aware is that Rails already has this built-in for you. It was in that comment that we just erased, right? So you can just change your locale file a little bit like that using notifier, which is the mailer name, URL, which is the method name, and subject, for you to define which is the subject you want to use. And it's just going to work. But then you can ask me, okay, you can remove the subject tab, and you can ask me, okay, what if I need to pass in some interpolation variable to the I18 call? Well, that's fine too. You would use it like that, but you can change the locale file too, right? And use like this. Rails has this default I18 subject method, which was always existed, but it was private before, and now it's protected, so you can actually use it. It's part of the API. And you can just pass in the interpolation methods you want, so you don't need to manually call I18 to translate that. You can just use the Rails method for that. And this is going to just work. Right? Okay, let's talk a little bit about Action View now. So, content tag for is, have you ever used a div for? Anyone? Okay, some. Right, so content tag for allows you to pass in which is the tag you want to generate for a list of objects, a collection of objects. So, for each object in that article's collection, it's going to generate an article tag with an ID and a class for that article. Right, and you can pass in a block, and then it's going to receive the article object, so you can generate content for that. So in this case, it's going to generate a list of articles like this for 2 articles, for example. And remember, Rails for 2 is going to be more added. Right. Okay, and you can use content tag for a single module too. It works the same way. It's going to output something like that. Right. Okay, so rendering empty collections. This was pretty much the example I showed before in the active record section. So we're using like author articles axis, render articles, and all that stuff. But you can refactor that because when you call render with a collection of objects, if there is no object in that collection, if it's empty, you can do it like that. It's just going to return nothing. So you can just render author articles, or if nothing was returned, just render the content tag or another part or whatever you want. So you don't need that if and else condition. You can just do render or content tag be no article font, for example. Right? This is a nice one to turn off your views. And partial locals. So let's say we have an article partial, right? And we want to render this partial from the authors, from the article list, or from the author show page. From the author, you just want to show the truncate body, and from the articles list, you want to show everything, right? So you pass in a full local just to control that. So in the full case, you show the full article body, otherwise you truncate it. The problem is that if you have a lot of places that use the partial, you have to always pass in the full variable, right? You may not want to do that. So you can use partial locals. The local assigns method is actually a hash that you have in your partials, in your views. And you can verify which locals were passed to your partials. So you can, instead of always passing the full variable, the full local, you can just use the local assigns hash and check if the full value is passed, right? A small one, truncate, now allows you to pass in a block, which is going to be called in case the text is actually truncated. So in this example, I added a read more link for that article, which is only going to be called in case the body is truncated. If it's not, the block's not going to be called. And now talking about internationalization a little bit, let's say we want the read more link to be translated, right? So we will do something like that. We will call I18 there and have that locale file. But if we want to have some HTML in that, it will get escaped in the output, right? So what people usually do, well, let's just raw here. It's okay, it's gonna call HTML safe on that, and it's going to be fine. But you may be introducing a problem here, because if later on you want to add some attributes like interpolation values, you may be adding a security problem to your application. So what you should do actually is just call that locale attribute name ending with HTML, underline HTML like that. And Rails will automatically mark that as safe for you, but only that piece of code. So you are not introducing a security problem anymore in your application. Rails will automatically mark that piece of HTML safe for you, but it will escape any other interpolation values you send. Right? And the last one is benchmark. The same way Active Record has benchmark, ActiveView also has this here, so you can use benchmark, passing a description and a blog. It's gonna log that for you in your default Rails logger. Cool. Action controller. So this was one of the pull request examples. So when you have a route that has a parameter like ID, you can redirect to another route and pass an interpolated value. So Rails, you know that this parameter here is related to that value to be interpolated. And exception handling. So when you generate a new Rails application, it's going to generate that public 404 and other files for you. But you can actually use the application route and the application to render the efforts for you by setting the exceptions app configuration in your application. Right? And what you can do with that is that you can go to your routes, define your route, error routes like that, and point to some controller, like doing the errors controller, which is going to be like that. You can have a different layout for that, and the methods in there, and you can handle everything in a nice format for you. Right? The only thing you don't want to do here is to screw something up, because you're already in an error state, right? If you do raise another error, no, that's another problem. Okay, bonus time. This is going to be really quick. Console. In console, you have the add variable, which is actually an instance of action special integration session. So you can call methods the same way you would call in an integration test. So I can say add auto path and to see which is the path. So I can do a get request like I'm doing a test, an integration test. It's gonna give me the output of that, so I can play around with my application, use the app there. I also have helper, which allows me to call any helper in an application. It's an instance of ActionView based. So you can call Rails helpers like time building rewards, you can call your own helpers like hello RailsConf. And you can call any helper on that to test them. And you can also define your own helpers in Rails. So here I added like a lead console helpers with an A method. Let's say every time I open the console, I need to find an article to do something quick to test, whatever. So I define a shortcut for that, and I can open up a console block in my Rails application file, require that console helpers, and include in Rails module. So it's going to be available for me wherever I want to type something in the console. It's a shortcut for my daily usage, right? And finally, sandbox. So whenever you go to the console, if you pass in the sandbox flag, you can do whatever you want, create records, delete records, change records, and when you leave the console, it's going to be rolled back. Right? So what Rails does is, when you start the console with sandbox, it starts a new transaction, gives you that message, and when it exits the console, it rolls it back. So you can test whatever you want there, and you can be sure that it's going to be rolled back. Okay, annotations. So you can have to-dos, fix-me, optimize comments in your application, like I did here, and you can call rate notes on our terminal, and Rails will summarize that for you. So it's a good way while you're working on something to have your to-dos there, right? And you can also use custom annotations, like here I have the RailsConf one, and I can do rate notes custom and pass in the annotation you want, and Rails is just going to show that, which is pretty handy. And the last one I'm going to talk to you is about updating Rails. Whoa, that's usually a problem, right? So I've seen many people doing manual updates of Rails, like going configuration file per configuration file and verifying what changed manually and doing this kind of stuff. And what they didn't know is that Rails has this task for helping you with that. So let's say I have a Rails 4 app and I am upgrading to Rails 4.1. So I change my gem file, run bundle update, and then I can run this Rails update task, right? And what this task is going to do is basically it's going to go over all the configuration files that are new in Rails and see if you have a similar configuration file there and ask you if you want to override it, if you want to see the difference between the two files and to see what changes so that you can update your own file manually, or if you just don't want to update anything. And it's going to also create new files that Rails has added into this new version. So it's a little, it's not a little, but a big help when you are upgrading Rails, right? You should definitely use that, right? And here's like the modified version, the git status after upgrading this application. So it modified some files, added another two files like the secrets one. It's definitely handy, right? So the idea here is that Rails has hidden tricks. Every part of Rails has hidden tricks, right? I showed you some of here. There are many more. Maybe some that people haven't ever found yet. But they are sometimes hard to spot. They might be a new option, a new method, something new released in Rails. But they can make us more productive while we are working with Rails, right? If you find something new today, it can help us several times in the future. And so every time you start something new, just stop a little bit and think. Think before actually going after patterns, and think if this design pattern is going to help me, X, Y, Z, or whatever. Ask yourself, can Rails help me in something? Can Rails do something that I'm trying to do here more easily? Can it help me? Can it do something for me? Right? So, do some search first. Go to API, go to guidelines, Google, Stack Overflow, whatever. There are a lot of places over the internet. Try to search what we're looking at first before actually trying to implement something. Ask around. Go to Stack Overflow. There is a Rails automated list. There is IRC you can ask stuff about. And follow changelogs, follow news notes, upgrading guides. If you can follow commits too, they will be helpful, but mainly the true ones are really important. And if you do find some hidden trick in Rails, whatever, remember, this is important. Right? Yeah, if you do find something, make sure you share it with others, right? Tweet, blog posts, tell your friends, whatever you would like to, and make sure you try to contribute back, right? Try to send a pull request to Rails, improve the documentation. There are a lot of missing pieces in the documentation that can improve it. You can help on that. And make sure you ping me too. So, this is my Twitter again. I would love to know any hidden trick you find and tweet about it and blog about it. Right? Thank you.